Hi everyone, my name is Desmond Annabrang. I'm the Grant Programs Manager here at Southeastern Minnesota Arts Council. This video is the first in a series designed to help you understand and apply for the Project Support for Individual Artists and Culture Bears grant. Before I go any further, I'd like to just very quickly highlight one important date. Applications for this grant are due on July 28, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Now that we're clear on the deadline, let's take a look at what we'll cover in this video and throughout the rest of the series. This video, or the first video, will look into program overview. Second video, getting your application started. Third video, project details. Fourth video, writing the narrative. Fifth video, building your spending plan. And the sixth and final video will look into finishing and submitting your application. Now that you have some sense of what the series will cover, let's start with the foundation of it all, understanding the grant opportunity. All right, so as we review the grant program, I'd like to point out two resources that may be useful during the application process. The first thing is the SEMAC website, the one that you're seeing on your screen. And the second thing is, the applicant journey. This is the applicant journey. The website contains the official program information, while the applicant journey helps connect the information into a practical guide for applicants. We'll talk more about the applicant journey later towards the end of this video, and maybe a bit about it here and there whenever it's relevant. I'll definitely pull it up. Anyway, as we move through the website, I won't be reviewing every page line by line. The information on these pages are available for you to read at your own time. Instead, I'll focus on highlighting the sections that are most important to understand before you begin an application, explain how they connect to the application itself, and share a few tips along the way that may help you avoid common mistakes. So with that in mind, let's start by taking a look at the website. So what you see on your screen at the moment is SEMAC's website. You could type in semac.org, hit enter, and it'll bring you to this page. And we'll be talking about the grant program, and you could access the information on different grant programs through this button over here. It'll take you to this page. Let's start by looking at the Project Support for Individual Artists and Culture Bears section. This part of the page provides an overview of the program and introduces several aspects that will appear throughout the application process. The first paragraph that I highlighted has one of the most important aspects of this section is the creation of new work. This grant is intended to support artists and culture bearers as they experiment, take on new challenges, and deepen their practice through the creation of something new. That doesn't necessarily mean every project starts completely from scratch. Some projects may build upon previous work or existing ideas. However, applicants should be prepared to clearly explain what is new about the proposed project and how it contributes to their artistic growth or creative practice. This idea of creating new work appears throughout the application, particularly in the project description and narrative sections, so it's worth keeping in mind from the very beginning. Moving on, another important decision applicants will make is whether they are an emerging or an advancing artist. This is not simply a question of how long you've been making art. Instead, applicants should think about the development of their artistic or cultural practice, the body of work they have built over time, and the level of recognition or support their work has received. Emerging artists and culture bearers, those are people who have their creative pursuits and are actively engaging with audiences through exhibitions, performances, social events, publications, etc., but they have yet to achieve sustained recognition or support for their work. Now, advancing artists and culture bearers, on the other hand, they have a body of work that demonstrates a sustained level of accomplishment, commitment, and artistic excellence over several years. Their work has been exhibited or performed in prestigious venues, and they have earned awards or grants for their work. Now, for culture bearers, the answer may sometimes look different just because of how different the artistic practice and social context that surrounds the creative process. A culture bearer refers to an individual trained by traditional elders or master artists whose artistic practice reflects the cultural life of a community with a common ethnicity, geographic or regional identity, occupation, language, or tribal affiliation. Because of this, there is no single checklist that determines whether an applicant should apply as emerging or advancing. Instead, applicants should take time to reflect on their own practice, experience, accomplishments, recognition, and the role they play within their artistic or cultural community. If you identify as a cultural bearer or as an advancing artist, you'll have the opportunity in the application to explain in an individual separate section. This will help give context to reviewers and staff to better understand your experience and category you selected. Now, during the eligibility review process, that would roughly be like a week after the deadline date, staff may contact applicants if additional information is needed to determine whether the selected category aligns with the information provided in the application. Okay? Now, moving on, I want to talk a bit about public engagement. Basically, it's this paragraph. Kind of start mid sentence in this part over here. So this is the next aspect that I encourage applicants to pay close attention to, which is the public engagement. Okay? Every funded project must include an opportunity for the public to engage with the work being created. Depending on the project, the engagement could take many different forms. It might be an exhibition, it might be a performance, it might be an artist talk, it might be a reading, etc., etc. What SEMAC is really looking for is a meaningful opportunity for people to experience or engage with the work. Later in the application, you'll be asked to provide additional information about this public component, including details about the venue, the accessibility to that venue, and the date of the event. Okay, now the last paragraph of this section, you'll also notice a section discussing projects that involve presenting, adapting, or translating existing work. Applicants sometimes assume this means they are no longer eligible for funding, but that is not necessarily the case. The important question is how the proposed project advances your own creative practice and how it supports the program's focus on creating new work. Applicants pursuing this type of project will find an additional section in the application and should be prepared to explain their artistic choices and goals. Okay? Now, let's talk about this last section over here. Again, I want to talk about everything line by line. So near the bottom of the section, you'll find information about the award amounts, application deadlines, and earliest possible start dates. I encourage applicants to pay close attention to the earliest start date. This is the earliest date an approved project may begin. Later in the application, you'll be asked to select a start date and an end date for your specific project, okay? Those project dates are important because they determine when grant-related expenses may be incurred. This is specifically relevant for the start date because you cannot have any expenses before the start date. When publicity activities may begin, again, the same with start date, you cannot start advertising the specific program that you want the grant to cover before the start date, and when your final report will be due. This is in relation to your end date, and the end date could be up to 12 months after the start date. Okay? We will revisit project dates later in the series when we discuss project planning and timelines. For now, let's talk about one other very important aspect of this section over here. Grant recipients must sit out one full fiscal year before reapplying for the same grants. Okay, so you'll see this note of the sit out requirement. If you receive funding through this grant program, you will need to wait one full fiscal year before applying again for the same grant. This is one of the most common questions SEMAC or I receive from past grantees, so it's worth understanding early in the process. We'll discuss this policy in greater detail when we review eligibility requirement. But yeah, I guess when we review this in the eligibility requirements later, I would like to pull out the applicant journey and show you how it could be helpful. I guess this is a perfect example to explain the fiscal year with the applicant journey. Okay. I just want to quickly mention this is the apply button. If you click this, it'll bring you to the logon page. It's the same with login to Grant Portal here. It takes you to that exact page. Okay. Just wanted to quickly mention that. Before we leave the grant programs page, I want to briefly point out that project support is not the only SEMAC opportunity available to individual artists and culture bearers. You may also see information here about the rural arts grants. This grant is intended to support arts experiences in small rural communities in southeastern Minnesota. You'll also see artists and culture bearers in the schools. This grant supports artists and culture bearer residencies during the school day for students in grades K through 12. And then the last one is our Emergency Relief Fund, or ERF. So this is it's a one-time emergency assistance for individual artists and culture bearers experiencing hardship, and it has its own dedicated page. You could click this button here, or this option here, or you could also go to Emergency Relief Fund option over here, and then it'll take you to this page. Or if you were to click this find out more, it'll also take you to this page. I just want to quickly mention ERF has its own step-by-step video and its applicant journey PDF. And in this page, you can see the timeline, selection process, etc., etc. Please feel free to check it out if you're interested. If you're interested to apply for the ERF, it is not a grant though; it is a gift. Read more about it, and feel free to ask me if you have any questions. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about two other important pages in our website that is worth mentioning before you start applying for the grants. Okay. First thing is I want to look at the grant eligibility and restrictions. This is one page that I highly recommend you to check out before you start applying for the grants. Especially before you invest significant time in the application itself. Please do read this section. It has all of the important parts. I just want to highlight some few things. Let's talk about some of the things mentioned in this part over here. So to apply, you must have been a full-time resident of the SEMAC region. That includes Dodge, Fillmore, Freeborn, Goodhue, Houston, Mower, Olmsted, Rice, Steele, Wabasha, and Winona counties, including the Prairie Island Indian Community, for at least 6 months before the final submission deadline. If awarded, you'll also need to remain in Minnesota for the duration of the grant activity. If you've recently moved or are unsure, email me or call me. I will be more than happy to help you. Next part, let's move on to the. Oh, I forgot to mention about the final reports. This is an important part that I think is worth mentioning on its own. So, another requirement applicants sometimes overlook involves final reports. If you have an overdue final report from a previous SEMAC grant, you will not be eligible to apply. In addition, if a final report is due before an upcoming grant deadline, that report must be submitted and approved before a new application can move forward. Okay? For returning applicants, this is one of the first things I recommend checking before beginning a new proposal. And then, also, we mentioned emerging and advancing earlier in the grant programs page. On this page, you'll see an additional rule related to those categories. Once an applicant has received funding as an advancing artist or cultural bearer, they may not later apply in the emerging category. Okay? It's important to carefully consider which category best reflects your current practice and experience. Now, one last thing mentioned here is grant recipients must set out one full fiscal year before reapplying for the same grant. Now, this is the perfect opportunity for me to bring out the applicant journey. Hang on. Alrighty, so here is the applicant journey. I will talk more about this towards the end of the video, but I will just use one of the section in this document to help me explain what the sit out policy is. So basically, recipients of only this grant program, okay? Remember, it's only this grant program. Recipients of a project support for individual artists and culture bearers grant must sit out one full fiscal year before reapplying for the same grant. This rule applies for the July deadline of this grant and the January deadline of this grant, okay? Now, what is SEMAC's fiscal year? Okay, so SEMAC's fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th the following year. And we could look at the two examples that we have here to help you understand better. If you were to get the grant, let's use the first example. If you got a grant in fiscal year 2025, you should sit out the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2026, that runs from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, and you are eligible again in fiscal year 2027, which runs from July 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2027. Okay? Let's look at example 2. If you were to get this grant in July or in the January deadline, both of them belongs to fiscal year 2027, you will have to sit out fiscal year 2028, which starts in July 1st, 2027, ends on June 30th, 2028, and you will be eligible again to apply for this grant in fiscal year 2029, which will start in July 1st, 2028, and it will end on June 30th, 2029. So, bottom line, if you're applying for this grant and you are a returning grantee, your most recent project support for individual artists and culture bearer grant must have been awarded no later than January 2025. Okay? I hope that's clear enough. If you're still confused in any way, feel free to email or call me. Now, moving back to this page, I want to talk a bit about this. So you'll also notice that individual applicants may receive up to 3 SEMAC grants per fiscal year. That includes 1 project support grant, which is this grant, 1 rural arts grant, and 1 artists and culture bearers in the school grant. In other words, receiving a project support grant does not automatically prevent you from applying for rural arts grants and artists and culture bearers in the schools. Now, let's talk a bit about project restrictions. The next section outlines activities and expenses that are not eligible for funding through this program. Okay, I'd encourage applicants to read these sections carefully on their own and pay particular attention to any restrictions that may apply to their project. So, one thing to keep in mind is that SEMAC is funding artistic and cultural activities, not activities that primarily serve another purpose. Okay, so for example, project related to a class, course, or degree are not eligible. Similarly, activities such as fundraisers, feasibility studies, capital improvement projects, and efforts to influence legislation cannot be supported through this program. And again, if you're unsure about anything else, feel free to email or call me. Well, call me or call us. I'll be the one at the end of the line answering the telephone, so feel free to call me anytime. Now, moving on to disallowed expenses. By any time, I mean office hours, okay? No one will pick it up after 4 p.m. Okay, disallowed expenses. The next section focuses on expenses that may not be included in your budget. A few restrictions that applicants commonly encounter include out-of-state travel or activities, expenses incurred before the start date, living expenses, alcoholic beverages, and grant writing expenses. It's important to remember that grant-related expenses and publicity activities must occur within the approved grant period. Okay? We'll revisit this requirement later in the series, but in general, when in doubt, ask. So, before we conclude, I'd like to point out 2 additional pages on the SEMAC website that I strongly encourage applicants to review. The first is the How to Apply page. This page outlines the requirements for a complete application, including project requirements, budget requirements, submission requirements, and other important information that applicants should understand before applying. We'll discuss many of these topics throughout the rest of this video series, but I strongly encourage you to review this page carefully on your own. I would also highly encourage you to visit our general application instructions page. Now, this page contains technical guidance, application tips, common mistakes to avoid, and other practical information that can help applicants navigate the grant process successfully. Again, while we won't cover every item here, it's worth reviewing before beginning an application. After reviewing those pages, the final thing I'd like to highlight is the applicant journey. Okay. So I'd like to very briefly return to the applicant journey and explain how it can be used alongside the SEMAC website. Throughout this video, we visited several different pages on the SEMAC website. Each page serves a specific purpose and contains important information about the grant program. The website remains the official source for grant guidelines, eligibility requirements, application instructions, and other program information. What the applicant journey attempts to do is to bridge that information found throughout the website with the application itself. It brings those pieces all together and organizes them from the perspective of someone preparing an application. Okay? So, for example, the website may explain eligibility requirements, project requirements, application instructions, review criteria, and grant responsibilities on separate pages. The applicant journey connects those topics and presents them in a way that follows the path many applicants take as they move from an idea to a completed application. Rather than replacing the website, the applicant journey is intended to provide context, okay? And plus, you'll also find some useful tools throughout the document. So, I just want to very quickly just look at what are the things mentioned in this document about SEMAC, about this grant. Ooh, I think this is easier on the eye. Sorry. Who should apply, what your project must include, what SEMAC cannot fund before you move forward, and it has all of these interactive features that could help you keep track. How many grants can I receive? About the fiscal year that we talked about. And again, checklists to keep track of what you have, what you need to prepare, what you need before applying is the title of this page. And then how the application process works, just a bit of context of what happens after you click that submit button. If your grant is awarded, what is to expect? Yeah. And then in the end, you have this spending plan worksheet to help you prepare for the budget section of your application. So, as you continue through the video series, I encourage you to use both resources together. I also want to highlight a few of other important things that might be useful. So, apart from the website and the applicant journey, we will also have this step-by-step video that you're currently watching, and also we will have 3 Q&A sessions. Now, the Q&A sessions are basically me opening a virtual room where you could stop by and ask any questions you like, okay? In relation to this grant, of course. But it could be like how to access your account, how to log in, any questions in relation to the application process, the system, or anything. Okay, and so we will have 3 sessions. The first session would happen on July 8th from 12 to 1 p.m. Second session, July 16th from 6 to 7 p.m. Third session will be held on July 24th from 12 to 1 p.m. And you will find all this link to the Q&A sessions and also this video and the applicant journey right next to this button over here. We'll have more buttons here. We'll have more buttons here after the grant window opens. More specifically, we'll have this video and the applicant journey for this grant available starting the 1st of July. And then, just to give you context, it'll look like something like this, but just on that page, because this is the emergency relief fund page. Okay? So I encourage you to use the website as your official source for requirements and policies. Use the applicant journey as a guide to help you prepare for the application. Use these videos to help you apply for the grant, and use the Q&A sessions to drop in and ask me any questions you like, okay? Now, I pulled the contact page here just so you could see the phone number and the email and our office hours in case you are thinking of calling us or sending us an email. Thank you for joining me for this overview of the Project Support for Individual Artists and Culture Bearers grant. My goal for this video was to highlight some of the key aspects, requirements, and resources that applicants should understand before beginning an application. In the next video, we'll move from the website into the grant interface itself. We'll look at how to access the application, navigate the grant portal, and begin working through the first sections of the application form. I hope you'll join me for the next video, and I wish you the best as you begin developing your project and preparing your application. Thank you, and goodbye.